We could take our seats, and Peter, if you can come up to the table, please. Daryl, can someone shut that door? Is it right? It's just.
Thanks, Jake.
Oh, cheers, man. Thanks. Okay, Andre and Celeste, you guys good to go? Or? Yep.
This week could be good.
Great. Peter, do you want to start? And so, again, you're just giving a quick overview, and then we're going to move through OPEX and things like that.
That's right. Just a few reminders, and then Russell will step you through the changes that have occurred to OPEX and the drivers behind them. Very briefly, from here, we take the direction and consensus of this meeting, and we will move forward as staff to prepare the draft for adoption on the 28th of February. Audit and risk will meet briefly before that to make sure the process has been fit for purpose. Go out to consultation 10th of March to the 10th of April, followed by what I think for most of you is a relatively standard process by now. Submissions, we do an analysis of those submissions for you, and then you go into hearings for people who want to actually speak to you about the draft annual plan. And then obviously we meet again and go into a final process for June adoption in late June of the annual plan. Just a quick reminder of what's changed. I know you've seen some of these frequently before. It's fair to say there's no clear view of the medium-term outlook. It all depends on which variety of expert you believe. There is no way we can hang our hat on a complete number that is reliable around inflation, interest, or any of those factors. That's one of the reasons why this annual plan has been, fair to say, quite difficult for an annual plan. This is at the same time as we've got significant cost escalation. It is worth pointing out for those relatively new to local government that we don't buy the things that are in the consumer price index, which is the basket of goods around domestic consumption, bread, milk and clothing. We buy things that are actually considerably more expensive. Asphalt, steel, diesel, engineers, things like that. So if you've had anything to do with construction lately, you'll know that CPI is not what we're all about. Those things are going up quite quickly if you can get them at all. Clearly there are cost and labour shortages as well. Getting the right people is a national-wide problem for New Zealand at the moment, and probably will be well into the medium term. Attracting and retaining talent is the name of the game at the moment. The market, in terms of people we can give work to, is not infinite. They're already signalling that they are managing the rate at which they accept work. So it isn't as simple as if you've got the money, you can therefore go spend it. Anybody who tries to get work done on their house at the moment will know at a micro level, you can't, just because you've got the money doesn't mean you can make it happen. So in other words, we need to look beyond our normal forecasts, and I guess our attempt to drive the rates down to 556 has been really based on the precautionary principle of we've got to protect our communities. So look, the team now will step you through what we've done to bring operating expenditure, staff costs down. There will also be an overview of what we've done to bring the capital program down to a deliverable level. It is worth noting that even though we've managed to get the rates down to what I suspect will be significantly lower than most authorities, we have not cut levels of service to do that. And we've continued to build a capital program that will take the city forward while maintaining our assets. So as a balancing act, it's been a bit tricky. And I think at this point, one last point, Three Waters, basically, as you know, the direction from central government is that Three Waters will not be included in Council's 2024 long-term plan for any councils in New Zealand. Until then, we will continue to maintain Three Waters to a fit-for-purpose standard, and that's built into this annual plan. We are continuing to engage with the Department of Internal Affairs on exactly how the process will work from here. And I think now I might hand over to you, Russell.
Brilliant. Thank you, Peter. So just a reminder from that initial briefing to where we are now, so a bit of a history. So we started at 14.6. Now when I say started, that was the first look at updating the model from the LTP data, updating for things that were known, like inflation, like interest rates increases, like proposed changes of levels from staff and other factors coming through. So that was never actually going to be what the rates were, but that was the starting point, and that gave us a view of the challenge in front of us. And so then we've gone through and made those changes there. We've looked, as Peter has already outlined, the capital delivery. We've moved levels of service proposed changes from staff. We looked at staff capitalisation, making sure that they were recorded correctly. So that's effectively where you have staff working on capital projects, they can be capitalised, so there's less of an impact on the operating and this costs, and so therefore rates. We looked at the rating growth, so that's the extra people coming in, or extra ratepayers coming into the city. Traditionally, I think last year it was 0.8%, so we moved that to 1.2%, with on the basis of the information coming from QV and where we were last year. I think last year we had an increase of 1.5% overall, but we don't anticipate that because there is some risk in getting too close, and we won't know what that is till right at the end of June. And we changed, smoothed our rating for debt repayment and asset renewals. We have a strategy of moving that to 100% being rating as opposed to debt funded. So we smooth that out. We won't be changing the date of being able to achieve that. It's still 2031, so that's that. And that left us with a position of 8.9%. So from there, we've taken through and we've looked at staff capitalisation again and found some more movement, so that's brought that down. We've looked at inflation across the organisation, those things where where inflation is locked into contracts. We've had to, it's quite restrictive, so we've put that through. Staffing costs we put, and there's probably about $100 million worth of operating costs where it's a bit more, not subjective, but where council has more flexibility. And so we've asked the business to absorb the extra inflation. Like there is inflation already built in, but not to the higher level. So it's about 5.5, just over 5% had been already built in. So we've asked the business to absorb the rest. So there's some risk in that with we're not being able to absorb it all, but we're confident that that can occur. There was an increase from the general revaluation of as Andrew and the QB guides have outlined, in rates on 3 water pipe networks. It's a bit confusing. Council pays rates on its own property, but so that's a cost and an income, so it nets off. Where it does get a bit tricky is for those assets that are managed by ECAN. So that's what that represents there. So that'll be a cost that we're paying through to the ECAN folk. We've put in the roving pothole repair team. So that's about $2 million gross. We get almost half of that back as a subsidy. So it's an increase through there. The eco event funding. So that's for major events. And the proposal was last week at briefing come through, so it's about an extra 0.32% increase. We've brought forward the CRAF funded capital expenditure of about $6 million. So that's increased the operating cost for that. So that's the debt, well not debt, but the we've got the money from CRAF already, and so it's sitting in the bank. We just don't have money sitting in the bank. We use it to offset our debt requirements. So that's the best use of those funds. So we'll bringing that $6 million out of means we've got to borrow more for that. So that's the cost sitting in there. We've looked at our opening debt assessment, where that'll be, taking into account the capital projects for this year. So it's coming down. We've looked right throughout the organisation at revenue streams, and I've got a separate slide on this later on. Any different ways in which we can increase revenue, thereby reducing the requirement of rate. So that's brought a small amount back. You see they're all small amounts, and that's the way to attack it. There's no silver bullet here. We've just gone through in a lot of detail, small amounts to try and bring the total down. We've looked at FTE efficiencies, and so we've been able to find some there. And we've had another look at the rating growth estimate. And again, based on the advice through from QV, we've proposing to increase that to 1.3%. So that's a saving there. Now, in an ordinary year, that's where we would be sitting. We'd be sitting at 8.08%. But this is not an ordinary year. From the 18 months' time, or just less, that the three waters will be moving away from council. So that's going to reshape what council looks like considerably. So we can take advantage of a number of one-off solutions here, because one-off solutions ordinarily you might drive the rates down in 1 year, but that means that because it's a one-off, the requirement will bounce up in the next year. So the removal of three waters and using group tax losses is bringing the overall rate down to just on the 5.6%. So a bit more detail on some of the things that have gone through to make up the financial model at this point. So the events system I've already spoken about. Burwood landfill, so realignment of the revenue for what we'd put in the plan, and also an adjustment because of the market competition. There's a number of legislative things in through here, like for the dam safety regulations, RMA housing bill. They've got an impact on the rates requirement. The pothole team I've covered off. Wakakatahi, they've got a model which help council will work with them to better assess the road assessment, so be more targeted in the work that needs to be done. So there's a cost for that. And hydraulics modelling obligations, so that's for stormwater for the consent. And we've brought in the Central City shuttle, so that's just the cost for the investigation. So on the flip side, being able to reduce the rates, I've talked about the subvention receipts, so that's the tax losses. Parakuri timing, so that's now going to be later than we initially planned, so we're not going to need the money as early, so there's a saving through there. Lower recycling processing fees has been a bonus to us. Like I said, the FTE efficiencies is almost $2 million worth there that we've brought through. We're looking to increase the rates penalties to 10%. It was 10% previously. I think a couple of years it's been now down to 7%, so we're looking to put it back up to the 10%. So that's on those folk who don't pay their instalment in time. I'll cover rates rebates later on in the presentation. We're going to get a higher trans fund dividend, and again the venues Otatahi, that's aligned with the group tax losses as well, just how that's managed. So the Capital Endowment Fund, we've had a close look at that, and the recommendation is to use $1 million of funds sitting within this fund to substitute for rate-funded grants. Now the reason for this is that because of the higher interest rates, the fund is actually generating more income than anticipated. So it's got a balance so far of $320,000. We've got expected allocated this year $150,000. That leaves a balance of 1.377. Taking off the $1 million still leaves a balance of 547,000. So
yeah, just to be clear, when you said funds, it's additional interest.
Sorry, it's additional interest. Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Great.
Yes.
No problem.
Yep. So again, that's a one-off. That's not to be looking to repeat that. As I mentioned, we've looked very hard, well, across the board really, at a lot of things, but just focusing on fees and charges, taking into account market forces, ability to pay for increases, and managing that, I guess, that balance between putting up the fee and impacting attendance dropping. And this slide sort of looks at those matters there that we've covered. So those are the aspects that we've gone through to cover off fees and charges. Again, to increase that as much as possible by bringing the rates down. So Andrew's just going to come through now and give us a...
So what we might do is stop there for, say, 10 minutes and take some questions.
Sure.
We'll just get OPEX dealt with and then move on to capital. So does anyone have any questions for Russell? Oh, Phil, sorry. You go first.
Can you just explain to me that just go back to that Burwood landfill stuff, if you wouldn't mind? Just explain that to me a wee bit more on why something's costing us more, because we must be bringing in quite a large amount of money for the amount of stuff that we're dumping there.
That's a good question, and we are, but we're not getting as much as we'd budgeted for. So we have to reduce that expectation from the budget. So that's for the what we had in the plan, and then having a closer look at it, like it's apparently quite a competitive market. And so again, we've had to readjust that back as well. So I'm not sure I can find out for you the total volumes and dollars that we are getting in, but that's a readjustment of the income expected to come through.
Oh, so it's not extra what it's costing us, it's just what we aren't getting, so to speak.
That's my understanding.
Okay.
Yes.
And the Capital Endowment Fund, how much is actually in it? Was in it and is in it now?
I'm not sure. Sorry, I understand the total value.
Answer there.
So, and I can get you the detail information. The Capital Endowment Fund is an investment counter fund, and it's only the interest that's spent every year, portion of the interest that's spent every year. In it at the moment, to memory, is about 300,000 K for this year, 320, and that's the fund.
How much is the capital? I might be wrong. I understood it was the profit from selling Orion. It was 100 million.
Yeah, and I think it's about 100 million that's in
So
there.
how much is in there now?
It's still a.
So why don't we? I mean, why don't we get? I know
Yeah,
Leah and I
get
were
the
actually talking about
We'll
yesterday.
get the detail of
We'll
what
get
was
something
in there,
circulated.
what the inflation.
Because it would
has
be. It's
adjusted.
actually probably a good time for new councillors as well to get up to speed with how it operates and everything. So, can we? Are you okay to Mary
Yes,
take
yeah,
that away?
and also we can get the information about how much we reinvest into the capital as well. So we'll get you that information.
Great. Thanks, Phil. Aaron, and then Sarah, and then Victoria.
Yeah, can you go back a few slides to keep going. Keep going. One more. Yeah, so the reminder of what has changed. So this is kind of a macroeconomics question, but because we hear the term cost of living crisis, and I know the word crisis is the most popular tweeted word on the planet of the last 3 years, but when we hear of a cost of living crisis, was there ever, and you look at all of the elements there, supply chain issues, labour shortages, which are pushing inflation, because we're in a free market economy, so when everyone's trying to buy a small number of items, the price just keeps going up. Was there ever a discussion between councils and even government departments to all put the halt on spending to bring down inflation?
Probably not a question for Russell, but no, it's a valid question. But
That's a great question.
Well,
no, you don't want to.
if you don't ask it of him, who do you ask it of and when? Because we're in an inflation spiral, and when you keep spending, you can't spend your way out of inflation. You've got to do the opposite. And nearly every one of those bullet points all point to councils and governments, who are the biggest spenders in the country, overspending.
Yeah.
And so when do we ever have that conversation about, and yes, we adjusted our capital program down to what we could deliver only. We never spoke about taking it below that to drive down inflation. That's irresponsible in a cost of living crisis. Let's just take, it's a cost of living
Yeah,
thing.
we might just go to questions.
It's not really a crisis because we don't treat it like that.
Yeah.
You're just
Okay.
simplifying it, Aaron. It's not that
All
simple.
right, let's not.
Oh, sorry.
We're not going to debate a public briefing.
Hey,
So
I was just getting started.
yeah, that's what worries me. Okay,
That's
Sarah.
for the budget meeting.
Thanks. Yeah, I've got two outstanding questions on OPEX from November last year, and I'm just wondering when that stuff's going to come through. One on community board funding, looking at what the operational funding is for those boards and how it's changed over the last couple of years, and the other one on the car parking situation and whether we can get efficiencies by stopping leases for some of our vehicle fleet. So both of those are still outstanding from November, and I sent through a reminder sort of a week ago on those, but yeah, haven't heard back yet.
Is that an action the finance team can take away?
I'll take that
or
with
Dawn will
Lynn.
take away? Yep, perfect. Thank you, Victoria.
Thank you. Just two quick questions. One was in relation to, you mentioned that Three Waters was not included in the council's long-term plan going forward, but that the costs were just built into the long-term plan. Can we get clarification? Is it at the same rate just for the next 23-24, or is there any different allowance in there as we head into the new world, so to speak?
No, it's a great question, and it's a confusing space. So in essence, the current long-term plan is in force, and this is the year we're talking about is the last year of that long-term plan. So whatever we had in there, or whatever council had in there to work on, to spend, that stays. DIA are very interested to make sure that stays as is, that there's no change. So then when we build the next long-term plan, which we've already started work on, the Three Waters component is not in there at all. So that's a significant impact on all of council, not just the people who are directly involved in that, but there's a number of ancillary activities in there as well. So yeah.
Yeah, thanks for that. It was just mainly in relation to whether it just stays the same or whether there was any tweak to it. And you've answered that. My other query is just, we talked about on the slide on what has changed that Aaron referred to before about the need to be increasingly more agile to respond to some of the external influences. I note that in the same breath we've talked about the one-offs that are not sustainable, and I just wondered whether you had any other comments in relation to our agility going forward, given that we've sort of raided some of that rainy day spending with these one-off non-sustainable initiatives that we've taken. Just whether you can make any comment on that.
Bear in mind, Russell's an accountant, so he'll naturally be conservative.
That's right. Thank you very much for the question. Like I said, I wouldn't normally be recommending a one-off situation like that because it is, the following year has a significant impact on what rates will be. So because of the unusual unique circumstances that we're in, we have an opportunity. So we are looking at that to be flexible. We've gone through pretty hard this year, or this process to thin out is just about everything that we can. I would say everything. It's following on from exercises that have been done previously prior to me to starting. But also the other major impact that I have some assurance in recommending that is that we're building the long-term plan, the next long-term plan. So because that reshapes council again, that will provide or open up revenues that we've just got to explore. So, yeah, does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. It's like in 12 months things could be very different again, particularly without the Three Waters costs in there. So there could be some more positive changes for us in moving into the next long-term plan as well to compensate for some of those rainy day spending.
That's correct. Yeah.
Councillor Henstock, just to also add to that, both myself and the CFO are content with the proposals coming forward, quite specifically because we're moving into an LTP next year. It is not something I would recommend normally at all, but as Russell has said, these are exceptional circumstances. We're probably in exceptional circumstances for the next 10 years, but we are trying everything to benefit the residents directly in the current climate.
Thank you. Just in the slide where you're saying rating for debt repayment and asset renewals, that'll save 2.1%. Is it possible to have that figure split out into debt repayment and asset renewals?
Thanks very much for the question. It's one activity. So what we're looking to do was move away from debt funding asset renewals to rate funding asset renewals. So we had a strategy to achieve that by the year 2031. So it wasn't a linear increase, it was a wee bit jumpy. And so what we've done, because of the circumstances this year, we've looked at how much was being charged for, or how much was being requested to continue that strategy. But for the 23-24 year, we've just realigned that increase. So there's still something in there, but we just realigned that to be more smoother overall. We're still planning to achieve the strategy by 2031, but that was just taking some of the heat out of the 23-24 year.
Okay, and so, yep, okay. Because, I mean, when you're looking at the impact on the following year, 24-25, would it be safe to assume that a lot of those asset renewals are Three Waters anyway?
Again, that's a really good question. Certainly.
Which we won't have to pick up.
Percentage?
Possibly.
Water assets? Total assets?
I wouldn't try and guess those things at this point in time. It's a guess. We're taking a whole council view of it.
Yeah, is this the time to ask about the cathedral grant, or is that in the next section?
Well, asked your question, Yanni. It's just a timing change.
Cool. So when we approved it, we were told that the grant from the council will only be made available once other sources of Crown and Church funding have been applied to the reinstatement project, and if fundraising for the cathedral exceeds the amount required, then the council's contribution will be adjusted accordingly. Are you able just to give us a sense of like why we're bringing forward the funding and if all those other sources have been used up, and what the fundraising amount is versus the project cost?
So I can give you, we will get for you the detail of that. However, the reason it's come forward, and we're only talking about 3 months, right, that we're bringing the funding forward from what we'd always agreed. It's just that it goes into a new year. That's the only reason it hits this. But I can give you the detail on all that. But yes, the first part is their funding from the other sources runs out. That's why it's come forward 3 months. Yep.
We can do a memo for you, Yanni.
That's a good call.
Yeah,
good
that's
call.
no problem.
Great. Okay. Hey, thank you very much, Russell. Andrew, do you want to come up and we'll go through CapEx? That's brilliant.
Kia ora koutou. Good morning, I'm Andrew Robinson, Head of the Program Management Office. This morning I'm just going to give you a bit of an update of where we came from the 6th of December. The capital program was reviewed and proposed changes were made to give us a deliverable program that was really important based on our past track record and performance. In doing that, we reduced the LTP provisions by 164 million through rephasing of the projects that were in there to a proposed 433. And on the 6th of December, we got some guidance from you and general support around that scale of program. This is what it looked like, the reduction from the FY24 year in the current LTP down to the more deliverable 433, and you'll see that the bow wave has been pushed forward into the LTP period, requiring us to do some more extensive review and consideration of those priorities when we get to the LTP. So that challenge will remain with us for the LTP considerations. So in doing this, we've got a realistic capital program that we should be able to deliver with the resources that we've got in the constrained market that we operate in. In doing that exercise, we ran a prioritisation process at a relatively high level. We looked particularly at things that were already committed and in flight. We looked at critical levels of service. We looked at regulatory requirements. And we looked at where projects were sort of joined up, project synergies, doing things together in little packages. So the changes that we made a zero change in the total LTP period across all those years, and the reduction is just in FY24. So definitely just a rephasing, but some further considerations for us as things like the strategic framework, the infrastructure strategy, and the financial strategy start falling into place. They'll provide us some guidance towards future prioritisation in the future LTP years. So just some of our key principles around deliverability. Just to remind you of these, we need to set realistic but demandingly achievable targets, and our track record gives us some good indication of that. We need to obviously manage the inflationary pressures which have been talked about by previous presenters. We think we can do that within the programs that we've got and the project contingencies, and if in the circumstances we have to bring back some money from future years, then we've got those provisions through the change management processes that we have as well. On the flip side, we need to be really careful about the any carry forward provisions so that we don't add to our planned commitment next year, and our intention there is to manage our way through this year with a net zero effect onto FY24, as we've been able to achieve relatively well last year. As I said, more in-depth assessment through the LTP process, so that'll be coming shortly. One point in particular, this middle one here, we need to be really careful about the impact of what I call attractive external funds, and I've got a slide on that to give you a bit of an update on that, a couple of those aspects shortly. So that's a quick reminder of where we came from 6th of December, and since that time we've had a pretty steady sort of continuation and refinement to the capital program from that date, and I'll just go through a few slides here to show you where those refinements have been made. There's been no big changes, kind of steady as she goes type of approach here. So the refinements to the capital program have determined a $439 million commitment for FY24 now. That's been some minor changes and some refinements, including the prioritisation of the CRAF program, which was referred to earlier. That's only a small impact, but it's made a small difference to the transport component there, the grey on the bottom left. The schedules that accompany this have been provided. The schedules 1 to 3 show the capital program by service, by ward, and by phase, and you're able to search and find your favourite projects through looking at those schedules, and that they support the detail behind these charts. This is a reminder of the impact of those rephases to what we call the primary drivers, and like a bit like owning your home or car, you must continue to paint your house occasionally and service your vehicle. So in some of the rephasing that we've done, we're showing here the impact of that on some of those primary driver descriptions, and we've got to strike a balance there about how we might compromise, for example, the renewal of assets or provision of new infrastructure, and balance that off against responsible stewardship of our assets versus how we can actually deliver them and afford them. So there are, like in anything, some compromises that we have to make in order to provide a deliverable set of projects. So just to provide a little bit more on this, one of these key principles around being able to deliver, there's currently two sources of external funding in front of the council. One is called the Better Off funding from central government. That's about $16 million over 5 years. Some of it's OPEX. It covers such things as some parks improvements, some tree canopy work, some pest control. There's a little bit of money in there for a contribution towards the Matatiki Hornby Service Centre, a heat recovery system, so it's around climate change related impacts. And also there's some funding in there for the South Library out in future years. So while we haven't fed these into the plan, the projects that are there are able to be accommodated, and we're waiting a final confirmation before we feed that in from a financial perspective. The second one is the SURF, Climate Emergency Response Fund. That's a transport choices sort of sub-package of that. And that covers from Waka Kotahi things like active transport, school travel and public transport. That one does potentially provide a significant kind of challenge for us in terms of deliverability going into next year. It's a $34 million fund, and as I warned in those principles, if we add it on top of our existing commitments, it could challenge us in terms of being able to deliver that and everything else that we've committed to in the 439. We've made provision in the plan for the access to those funds, so that's at 10% from the council gets you access to the 90% top up from Waka Kotahi. And staff are currently working through the options for how we can accommodate that, or how we might manage that by way of addition, substitution, extension of the fund, because there's some currently there's some criteria around when you have to use that money, but staff are in discussions with Waka Kotahi about the flexibility that we have around that fund, and we'll report back on that once that becomes clearer. But that's a good example of a category there, one of our guiding principles, if you like, about making sure we stay strong and true to our commitment of the 439. So expect to hear more about that as that crystallises. So in summary, we had a 433 number back in 6th of December. Nothing was cut from the total long-term plan. It was moved or rephased into the outer years of 25 to 31. Just a reminder in terms of the scale of rephasing that $164 million, it's a big number, and it equates to, for every, you might remember, every 80 odd million is a 1% rates equivalent per year. You don't get that in the first year. It's split with 25%, 75% pro-ratering. So for $164 million reduction in FY24, the rates advantage on that was around about 0.5%, accumulating to a total of 2% the following year. So we've landed on a 439 with the schedules updated and refined to support that, and as I said, further opportunity for prioritisation of those deferred projects in the next LTP process. And as Russell and others have spoken about, the Three Waters position will become clearer in that time to allow us to accommodate those decisions and movements as well. I've just spoken about the external funding. We'll monitor that situation and come back to you once it's all confirmed. We'll carefully manage that carry forward position and be looking for a net zero impact on FY24. And just to summarise, that 439 is probably a good position to land on in terms of our ability to deliver and do what we say we'll do. And it's sort of a balance between good stewardship of our assets and prudent financial management for a good deliverable program. That's it, Sam, from...
Great. Do we have any questions on CapEx? Yeah, we do. So we'll start with Tim and then Phil.
Thank you, Andrew. When you mentioned capital attractive additional on page 43, I think it is, when we look at the Wakatahi funding and we get 90% for 10% investment, is our transport team then reducing their overall spend to take advantage of that, or do they have their program going forward and that doesn't change and they try and find an additional 10% to fit that?
Yes, that's a good question. There's 10% allocated to projects already that would ensure we qualify for that 90%. But we haven't put the 90% in there yet because we need to get our heads around how we can manage that without adding to the burden and making the 439 plus 34 million and then potentially make it undeliverable.
But then I guess the follow-up question would be, would we not reduce our transport budget to concentrate on the 10% to get the 90%? Because although we're staying with the 439, in reality, for some of that, we're only paying it's only 10% of our ratepayers' money rather than 100%.
Yeah, so that's some of the considerations the transport team is making now as to how to accommodate it, how to manage it, bearing in mind that some of the existing commitments would be attracting Waka Kotahi subsidies anyway. So there's already external funding components in the existing program. It's just getting that balance right and ensuring we don't overcommit.
So the principle, I would say this as you would expect, if we are able to secure government money and to fit it within the programme, we should be doing so, because the minute we turn down money, the ability to get money in the future becomes increasingly more difficult. So that's why, and I can see Lynette sat right behind you, is absolutely working through how can we pull the rabbit out of the hat. I don't want to give you a definitive answer now, Councillor Scandrett, because they're still working on it, but we will be doing our very best to have our cake and eat it if we can.
And I realise that, so if there are any shifting around required, then that will be coming to all councillors. Because
Yeah, Lynette, do you want to add to that at all?
I was just going to say that would come back to council. That would be your decision. We would come back with the options. Yeah.
So thanks. Along the lines of what Tim was just talking about, if we can't, because we can't deliver, we're holding back on that $34 million for climate change money. Does it have to be spent on, say, we'll say bus lanes or things like that, or things that transport team are real busy and they can't deliver what they're doing now without having the extra 39 million thrown at them? Can we throw that at, say, council vehicles, modifying them to use alternative fuels? Because is that what that fund is for, or does it have to be in physical things like bus lanes and stuff?
Yeah, I think I'll let Lynette answer the criteria of the fund there. Thanks.
Yeah, the team put in a bid, as we briefed you before the bid went in, the bid for particular projects. So you bid for projects and the projects have been successful. We are now figuring out how we could work to deliver that.
So we can't use it, if it wasn't in your bid.
Just randomly use it for other stuff. Yeah.
Okay.
We've got to use it for the bids.
Thanks, and thanks for the clarification, Dawn, because I think one of the things we need to make sure is that we are able to deliver this stuff, and we've seen in Auckland that making sure that we deliver our climate-related stuff that's to do with mitigation and adaptation is really important in this space. Are we looking at like a separate delivery model? So I note that, we've got a separate delivery model for Te Kaha, because otherwise Te Kaha would take us well over our, deliverability limit. It's still being delivered by council, but we've got we're looking at some sort of separate delivery model, because I know we've got, significant transport additional funding now.
Do you want to cover it? 'Cause it's resources.
We're looking at various things, Sarah. The underlying problem will still remain, though, whether you have a separate delivery model, whether we do it through whatever mechanism, the private sector also has to deliver what we want to deliver as well. It doesn't matter what the model is, it makes no difference in relation to that. So as I said before, we are trying very hard to figure out how we can make sure we can spend this money, because it's 90% government, 10% us. And Lynette's literally just returned from leave. Once I have that in front of me, I'll be able to brief you more formally.
Great, thanks.
Wastewater treatment plant, for example,
Right.
which we
Would
need
take
to
us
treat
well over.
separately. Yeah.
So.
Cool. Okay. And then Aaron.
Thank you. I was just trying to sort of, I'll give you Gloucester Street as a substitution, because the other external project funding was the Streets for People, and that's not being mentioned, but there's also commitments that we have under that program. So Gloucester Street has about 3.4, which ironically is about 10%, which would pay for those other projects. And we've also got a project underway. And the Finance and Performance Committee has shown that we don't have a hope of spending the Gloucester Street money in the current financial year in which it's budgeted. So just put the hands up for that one.
Sure,
but I just wanted to get clarification on the CRAF, because
Well, hang on. Just one at a time. So on that one, what do you want?
Well, I'm just
It's
flagging
offering
that
a
as a
substitute.
substitution. So staff were saying that we've got.
So has that gone through to them so that they can, like, has that gone
Well,
through?
I'm raising it now because
But
I'll email it in.
yeah,
if
that
you
would be
want.
useful
Okay.
if you can send it through so the team can actually do it as opposed to this. Yep, right.
Just wanted to
next one.
understand the CRAF project. So in the first briefing that we had, we currently had 15 million on budget for CRAF in 24-25, 16 million in 25-26. The first briefing we had, the proposal was that we take $11 million from 24-25 and $4 million from 25-26 and move that out to 26-7, 27-28. So the bulk of the money then got put into 26-27.
Yanni, I'm getting confused and I can usually follow this
So
stuff.
I just wanted to
just at
understand.
a high level, what do you want?
high level. Yeah. So I'm just trying to understand how much in the, not the individual by area, but just the total craft package, what the current proposed change is in terms of quantum for 25-24, 25-26, 26-27 and 27-28.
Okay. Right, so they won't have an answer. Well, you probably don't have that now.
There was a memo circulated to councillors that answered that question.
So can we just get
pull that out again?
some
I haven't
clear
got it to
advice on
hand.
what we're proposing to put into this
in the memo,
this annual plan,
Yeah.
and how that's staged? Because we had a good briefing on it before Christmas, I think.
And it is detailed in that memo that went out before the last briefing we had at the end of January.
So can we just have something that reflects?
I'll chase that up. That's
got
fine.
the deadlines and
So if we wanted to bring forward, if we wanted to keep the existing craft money on budget, do we need to get approval from Treasury, like to make such significant changes, or what's the sort of permission approval process?
That's contrary to the resolution from council, which said we were leaving it as we programmed it.
Well, yeah, we had that discussion last week. So.
Can I just refer you back to that memo? I'll make it available to you. It's got the deadlines of the CRAF program and it's got the associated budget alignment with it. We've aligned it and refined it as best we can. If you want to make any further submission on it, I guess
Just at a high level, though,
there,
I was trying to understand if we need to seek any permission from central government around changes to the CRAF program.
The question's just been answered. No is the answer.
We don't. Okay, cool.
Can you just remind me, please, Andrew, for members and public's benefit, when that memo was actually sent out to elected members?
Yeah, the briefing we had last week to councillors ahead of this, it went out with
so it was
with
only
quite
last
a lot
week?
of attachments, so it might well have been
So-
lost in the myriad of other things, but it was in there together with one from about Pages Road and some phasing.
Thank you. So last week.
I've found it. Thank you.
Thank
Great,
you.
thanks, Yanni. We also went through that last year as well, and it was quite a useful breakdown of percentage complete by certain time periods as well.
That's correct.
We probably though do need to look at how we make that public facing. So if someone can take that away, that would be useful. Right, Aaron.
Yeah, so a couple of different questions. The first one is when we started in our process, I think around October, and we had the big number that we were looking to bring down. One of the questions we asked was around how many contracts hadn't been let in the current financial year, and we would look at, do we still do them? But I don't recall anything coming back yet. Has anything come back? Of any sort, right down to a lick of paint or, a few hundred metres of carpet?
Aaron, I think that did come back. I have a vague memory of it.
So we definitely looked at the status of all of the contracts, and from memory that information was provided before Christmas. Again, we can dig out the relevant schedules and make sure that you're fully aware of the assessment that was made.
Yeah, because at some point, I don't recall there ever being a decision or even a discussion around, would we still do that this year? Would we still do that this year? Like when, rates are at the rate of the increase they are and inflation's at 7.2%, it doesn't seem that the debates have been that robust in getting our costs down when we haven't had that discussion. So, I mean, the work may have been done, but we haven't discussed literally cutting anything.
So we'll get that circulated. I mean, yeah.
Will it be a discussion within this year, Sam? Will we actually save $1?
Well, it's a very helpful question, Aaron. Thank you. No, I mean
You're an accountant.
The reality is, just come back to the purpose of this. This is the public-facing briefing to show where we've got to today. This isn't the end of the sort of annual plan. We're still going to strike it in June. There'll be a end of February a debate around it where people can look at different options for different things. So yeah, certainly this is only getting the public up to speed where we have got to.
And the other one is a follow-up to Phil's question. I'm asking around that climate emergency money. Is that all prescribed, like you can only spend it on some bikes or a transport program or a bus, or if you can show that you could spend it on something that actually reduces carbon emissions considerably, you're allowed to spend it on that, like a fleet change? Like if you can reduce rubbish trucks by 90% emissions, are you allowed to spend on that? And if not, why not?
Yeah, so I think so. No, why don't we just stop? Why don't we stop?
Yeah, but
so,
it was just a straight no.
Aaron,
rather than.
We've just heard earlier on, but when we were briefed on it, there was a list of projects that we put in and was submitted. So it's probably not the place here to get into the criteria of the government's fund, but your point's certainly not lost. Okay, Tyrone. Yep.
So that is a no.
So your point's not lost, but we've already put in a list of projects which have been approved, so we can't change it even if we wanted to.
Right.
Yeah.
So it is pre-prescribed.
That's what I said. Your point is not lost. Yeah. Right, Tyrone.
Thanks, Sam. Sorry, this is quite a micro question, and I have raised it before and with staff, but I just want to double check. So there's a project on the Head Walkway where there's a proposed funding reduction of 200k. So it's going to have a negligible impact on rates, and I don't think it's a capacity issue. So I'm just kind of wondering what the sort of the thinking might be there, and how easily reversible that might be.
So if we just go back to the, I appreciate it's a micro level, but at the high level, what council had agreed before Christmas was that there was effectively a limit on the capital program. So if there's stuff that wants to be brought in, just got to find stuff to take out.
Talking about 200k here.
Great, so find 200k.
Or convince your colleagues to add 200k.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I'll give you some. Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Look,
Any other questions?
Yeah.
Celeste. Yep.
Can't resist a good micro question, but going back to some of the capital program areas that are being marked for rephasing, again, this was something that was covered last year, but in terms of the Waitaki Street Storm Basin, that one there was initially flagged for rephasing due to consenting issues, but now it's primarily a financial constraint. And I note that Three Waters don't recommend rephasing. Have we sort of reassessed projects that, in the light of what's happening elsewhere in the country, might be seen as more critical in terms of risk to the... So this particular project has impacts in terms of flood mitigation, and that's something I think we should be prioritising this annual plan, and whether we're looking at other factors that we should consider apart from the financial constraints.
Yeah, so it's probably a little bit similar to the answer I was going to give to the last question. So some of these refinements sort of come down to deliverability, which might be the design, development, or the consenting phases or whatever. So your particular one, Waitaki Street, I don't have it in front of me, but it will have been rephased to match the delivery program. To your question is, have we run another screen based on recent flood events up north? No, we haven't, but there's a lot of work in the program, the Three Waters program, stormwater and flood protection, that that do address those things. For example, the OARC program, and work around the Opawaho Heathcote catchment, which we've seen a lot of good success in. So definitely those things are occurring in the program, and the climate and resilience lens is kind of run across every project as it's designed as well, whether it's a park, a facility, or a stormwater network.
Just going back to that, I just want to double check with staff that this project itself isn't actually due to a deliverability issue. It's a financial constraint, so therefore it can be delivered. That's the last advice we receive from staff. I just want to confirm that. So perhaps
I
staff
can look
come back
into the
and confirm
Waitaki
that.
Street one more. If it's accelerating more than the funds provide for, there are bring back provisions that we could use if those funds are required earlier. But I'll have a look into it in a little bit more detail.
Thank you.
And it's just to step up and think roundedly, and this is for everybody's benefit. What we are doing is putting forward a proposal in relation to our budget. This is our consultation phase. We are not setting the budget in any way, shape or form. You won't be doing that until the end of June. You'll have all of the hearings process to go through. You'll be able to do substitutions, bring backs, bring forward in your debate in June, which will allow you then eventually to set the actual budget. This isn't the end. This is only the consultation document. And it's important we get that consultation document out on the 28th of February to do the proper consultation with the public so they can also give the feedback to the elected members through the hearings.
And that's the point. I mean, really good question you raised, Elise. So in the end, if you decide, if Three Waters have indicated they can deliver it, it's just getting enough of your colleagues convinced that actually that should be ranked higher than something else. So there's nothing to stop you doing that. Yeah. Great. Any other questions? Or else we'll move to... No? Perfect. Peter, do you want to come up? Thank you very much, Andrew, for that. Do you want to come up and conclude, please?
Right, in the home straight now. Look, we've actually seen a lot of this content before about the conditions we're facing, so I'm not going to line by line this slide again. Moving through, look, this slide is here, and I don't think we have Andrew anymore.
I can speak to it if you like.
But I think it is worth speaking to about why it's there.
Thanks very much, Peter. So the reason for that slide is pretty much in a response to a question from Council at the last briefing, and that the rates rebate is a program that Council administers on behalf of central government. So it's up to $700 per household. Can apply for low-income families. Can apply, so that's available. Council also has a large number of payment plans available for folk who have difficulty paying as well. But we're just reiterating that we administer it. We have no say in the amount we just help with the calculation and administer that for the ratepayers.
Okay, so I guess we're at the end of the beginning. We now we take the information that we've provided to you over the last few months and your feedback, and go away and build a draft annual plan for Audit and Risk Committee and Council on the 28th of February. Then we obtain the community feedback and go into the final. So as Dawn has outlined, this is one of many, many bites at the cherry. This is by no means the final. And lastly, it might be useful for Katie to come through and just outline how we're engaging with our community on the annual plan and the content in it. Some of it is unusually complex. The differential stuff is hard to communicate. So I guess over to Katie.
So consulting there from the 10th of March through to the 10th of April, that's a 4-week period. We're going to have all information up on our website, have your say pages, plus we're going to have limited numbers of print documentation in libraries and service centres. We're going to be rebooting that Bubbles tool for CapEx and OpEx expenditure, just to make it easier for our residents to see what's changed. And we're going to be promoting our consultation via our usual council communication channels, emails to stakeholders and networks, and as part of that email there will be a standing offer there to attend any community meetings that might be happening during the consultation period, and we'll also be running a marketing campaign. We're going to be doing some targeted engagement to encourage that diverse range of voices in the conversation, and we're going to be looking at a dedicated number for email for people to get in touch if they've got specific questions as a kind of a triage to make it as easy as possible for people to understand the conversation.
Kia ora. Just a quick question around the presentation around your comms and the documents that the public are going to see. Mm-hmm. What does that sort of usually look like? Sorry, I haven't seen documents much.
So we have a consultation document, which is where we effectively talk through what an annual plan is, what's included in this year's annual plan, so what's changed from the long-term plan, and we also highlight in the consultation document any key points or key questions that we'll be consulting on. So obviously the proposed business differential will be quite a big section in that consultation document. So that's a hard copy document. We also have that supported online electronically, and we could also be looking at, depending on sort of like how it all comes out in the wash, some separate kind of like A3 folded A4 kind of flyers that go into a little bit more detail if we think that's going to be useful.
I know that the comms previously around consultation have been under a lot of public scrutiny based on the legibility of it. What improvements are going to be made for this round?
Well, we always try to write in an easy plain English style, style, and we do spend quite a lot of time trying to make it as easy to understand as possible. There's always room for improvement, but as with previous years, we'll be looking very closely at as making it as easy to understand as possible, while also making sure that people get the information that they need. And there is a balance there, because some of the stuff is a little hard to explain, some of it.
Thank you. And I just had one, and Leah, it might be, I can't see Andrew Jeffries here anymore. Can you just explain to me, so the QV values will get loaded up onto our website. I mean, given the change in the valuations and the rating impacts, are we going to be able to have something indicative for people of the draft rate rises so they can log on and have a look once that consultation struck? Do you want to, is it you that can talk through that?
Yeah. No. So what's going to happen from tomorrow, the new CVs will be available on our website. As you know, that QV have got them already up. What we are working through is, which we haven't done before, but we are going to do it after the adoption date of your draft annual plan, because there's no point, we can't do it before that date because it may change. We will put another tab onto our website in that QV, which will show the indicative rates increase based on the revaluation and your draft annual plan rates increase. So they will be able to see there, but it won't be until after your draft date, adoption date.
Okay, so another month, and effectively I'll be able to log on, type in my address, and go, this is what we're proposing. I can submit on it if I want, and go, I think you should be doing this or not.
Yep.
Okay, great. We've got Mark, and then Yanni, and then Andre, and then we're out of time. So, sorry, I did not. Mel will forever hold it against me. Mel first, and then we'll move through.
I can't remember which consultation it was, but there was a method where people could send in videos and do different ways of getting feedback. Mm-hmm. Is that something that could happen this time too?
I don't think there's necessarily any restrictions on how people can choose to provide their feedback. If they would like to send in video, we can certainly accept that. It's something that we'll be looking at more closely for the long-term plan, but if people would like to send in some video, then we'll make that work.
And on the other side, from our side, I wonder if, I know this is all a video essentially that we're creating now, but I wonder if like a video to talk through the consultation document and explain things might be a good way of putting this information out there, because we don't really tend to do that.
No, we can definitely look at that.
Yeah, cool.
Thank you. Just thinking, as elected members like to get out to things like markets and the likes, will there be some hard copies of the annual plan consultation documentation to take out for those sorts of direct engagements?
Yes, there will be some available. We're working through your governance teams to work out exactly what you might need, but you might find in that kind of a situation that a flyer might work better. Yep. Because there is, I guess we have to sort of like balance the costs of producing en masse a whole lot of printed documentation, and given where we are with our waste minimisation as well, with something that's a little bit of an easier read, but points people to where they can find out more information, and that's where the flyer really comes into its own.
Yeah, very good.
I just wanted to thank staff for putting the additional information on the website. I think that'll be really useful. The other thing I was wondering is, given the kind of quite significant increase for people's property values in some areas where they probably may not be expecting it, I know on our website we traditionally only use, I think, for a few months after we put the previous valuation. But are we able to show the trend over time, over the last, I don't know, 3 valuations, for example? Or just at least have the figure so people can kind of see what's happened?
I can't answer that, Yanni. I'll have to ask the question and just to see, what the cost of doing that is and the benefit of doing it. So I'd have to come back to you on that.
Okay,
cool.
Andre, and then we're done.
Thank you, Sam. I guess I'm keen to understand how many questions we'll be able to ask residents this year when this consultation goes out. Kind of carrying on from Aaron's question about decisions we'll have upcoming on what potential changes we can make to the annual plan. Obviously, we want a consultation to be as meaningful as possible. When we're asking the question, do you support a 5.6% increase? The answer is usually fairly predictable. No, we don't support that. But how many options will we be able to put in front of residents to have a say on this time around?
We don't generally frame everything in an annual plan as an option.
We're something to have a say on.
That's more accurate. We're putting it out there and saying, based on the conversations between staff and councillors, we believe that on balance this is a good way forward. And then it's open-ended what they provide feedback on. It could be as small as a project or as big as the rates number. So we're not going to go out with option A, B, C kind of annual plan, because it's important to remember the purpose of an annual plan is to keep the LTP current with changing events. It's a series of adjustments rather than the fundamental rethink of OPEX and CAPEX in a long-term plan. So we'll be presenting the adjustments we're making as on balance the best set of adjustments we can do. Does that frame it for you?
I guess I'm just trying to figure out if we've got the opportunity to ask many other questions for feedback,
differential,
as opposed to just the increase in plan as a whole. Keeping in mind that the plan is several hundred pages long, that the average member of the public will not be able to digest.
So the consultation document itself normally sits around sort of like 30 pages or less. We do some prompt questions throughout that around, have we got the balance right, that kind of carry on. How that actually works out in terms of the questions that we ask at the end, it tends to be a more general one to provide feedback. There will obviously be one about the business differential this time around, if that's something that has progressed. And there will be, I'm sure, a couple of other sort of like smaller questions that might link in directly to something in the consultation document.
Cool. Great, thank you.
Right, Andrea, it's a really, really good question actually, because there's nothing to stop your community, for example, raising an issue that they're passionate about for council to consider in the annual plan if something is delayed that you want brought forward or things like that. So, really good question.
But to be clear, because I don't want some misinterpretation, if it was completely brand new, that's something that the council had never discussed, wasn't on its radar, you would not be able to slot that into the annual plan. That would be an LTP matter. Yeah.
Yeah, and fear not, I'm not going to try and slot heaps of things in.
No, I'm not suggesting at all.
I guess just my question was, I understand we're fairly limited for what changes you can make to annual plans. So I guess my question was, is there the possibility that or will it be likely that there will be other questions that can be asked to try and get feedback on things rather than just the plan as a whole?
No, because this is an annual plan process. If it's related to something completely different, then Katie will be having a conversation with the elected members who would have a report.
Yeah, understood.
And be going through whatever it was that you might be in your mind in terms of a consultation. It would probably be separate.
And I think Leah might have something to add, noting that we're 2 minutes over time.
Not for that. I just wanted to clarify, because I think it's really important the public understand this, in regards to Celeste's comment before in regards to staff advice that said it was a budget issue, not a deliverability issue. What you've just misunderstood the answer. The answer is it's actually not it's the fact that your substitution you'd put in had no budget in 24. So you couldn't use that substitution to put this one in because the budget for those projects you're suggesting you substitute it didn't actually have budget in 24. It is a deliverability issue. So if you're going to substitute, you've got to ask for substitution on things that are actually in that year. So I just wanted to clarify that for the public, because I just want to be very clear. This is a deliverability thing, not affordability. We can't just throw more money at it. We can't deliver it. Thank you.
Yep. Great. Thank you, Leah. That's very, very useful. Okay. Well, I think, Katie, that concludes it. And Peter, thank you very much for bookending that for us and getting a run through.
Sorry, just a quick finish. Look, I know everybody was very tired towards the end of last year. there's been a lot of goodwill and a lot of high quality discussion in getting to where we are. It makes life a lot easier for staff. Thank you very much.
Yeah, no, thank you. And we'll continue to communicate as we work through that consultation stuff, and we'll make sure that the team here and the public can see that before it obviously goes, for a council decision. So, yeah, thank you all very much, and then we'll be back this afternoon.